With Russia and China deploying advanced new fighters and surface-to-air missiles (SAM), the task of gaining and maintaining air superiority over an increasingly more lethal battle space falls to a small and elite group of U.S. Air Force pilots flying the mighty Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. Conceived during the waning years of the Cold War, the stealthy, high-flying, supersonically cruising Raptor was designed to defeat the most fearsome weapons the Soviet Union could hurl at the United States and NATO during the Third World War in Europe. However, with the end of the Cold War and subsequent 1991 collapse of the Soviet Union, the F-22 was left without a mission, or so it was thought. Indeed, the second Bush and Obama administrations canceled the F-22 program in 2008 after only 195 aircraft. 187 production planes were ordered because they had made the assumption that high-end state-on-state conflicts were a relic of the past. However, as it's becoming increasingly apparent, they were wrong. Earlier this year, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter wrote about a return to great power competition. We will be prepared for a high-end enemy. That's what we call full spectrum. In our budget, our plans, our capabilities, and our actions, we must demonstrate to potential foes that if they start a war, we have the capability to win. Because the force that can deter conflict must show that it can dominate a conflict. Carter said, speaking at the Washington Economics Club in February, "In this context, Russia and China are our most stressing competitors. They've developed and are continuing to advance military systems that seek to threaten our advantages in specific areas. And in some cases, they're developing weapons and ways of wars that seek to achieve their objectives rapidly, before they hope we can respond." Why America needs the F-22 Raptor, now more than ever. Now, with voices on the left and right clamoring for action in Syria, where the Kremlin is propping up its longtime ally, the Assad regime, the Pentagon finds that it has to rely on its tiny fleet of 186 F-22 Raptors as the call comes to establish a no-fly zone or a safe zone in the war-torn nation. The Raptor is the only operational combat aircraft that the United States operates that Washington can rely on to take on and defeat advanced air defenses, such as the Pantsir S-1, S-300 V4, and S-400 that Moscow has dispatched to Syria. Moreover, it's the only aircraft in the U.S. Air Force inventory that possesses a huge performance overmatch against late-generation Russian fighters, such as the Su-30SM Flanker H and Su-35S Flanker E, both of which the Kremlin has also deployed to the region. Our role is to kick down the door. First Fighter Wing Commander Colonel Pete Fessler, a veteran F-22 Raptor pilot, told me during a visit to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. We are without a doubt on the leading edge of whatever force you're going to send, because we have an airplane that has a capability that no one else has. Training matters. But while it's important to have the right tools, more important is the human dimension. Pilots and maintainers must be trained and ready to defeat the highest-end threats if they're to be sent into combat. Recently, I visited the U.S. Air Force's elite First Fighter Wing, a vanguard unit flying the F-22 Raptor, during an operational readiness exercise. Unlike a large force exercise such as Red Flag or the U.S. Air Force Weapons School's mission employment phase, which are focused on developing pilot skills, an operational readiness exercise is designed to test a unit's ability to deploy. It's essentially a dress rehearsal for going to war. The Raptor pilots, while they are a critical component, are still just one part of a team. Nothing is going to happen unless the maintainers can get the airplanes running. The LO, low observable, maintainers can keep the skin healthy, the munitions guys can build the bombs and the missiles, and the weapons loader can get them on the airplane. The air traffic controllers can launch them. Intel folks can prep the pilots for the mission they're going to do. All of those things have to come together, and if they get out of sync, none of it works. Fessler told me as he showed me around the flight line. This exercise was designed to take us out of an in-garrison steady rate operation, rapidly mobilize, deploy, regenerate the aircraft, and then turn right into sustained combat employment. There's no other way to train for that. As Fessler explained to me, the idea behind the exercise was to take the 6 squadrons that make up the wing, plus personnel from the Virginia Air National Guards, 192nd Fighter Wing and the supporting units and deploy them to a different part of the base while simulating austere conditions. For the purposes of the exercise, the wing was given prepared to deploy orders for a particular theater and told to get ready to leave with very little notice. Once ordered to deploy, the wing and its personnel then had to package all of the support equipment and configure their aircraft for that particular theater, and then deploy within a few hours. Indeed, during my visit, the wing's 2 F-22 squadrons had deployed to 2 different parts of the base and were operating out of tents on the flight line. It's very carefully orchestrated, Fessler said. The ultimate insurance policy. In many ways, the Raptor is the U.S. Air Force's insurance policy. While the rest of the Air Force has been preparing for and fighting low-intensity warfare scenarios, as an elite vanguard force, the Raptor fleet is focused almost exclusively on defeating the highest-end threats. We've been focused on the high-end threat all along, Fessler said. In fact, the departure from standard for us is the times we go over for OIR, Operations Inherent Resolve, the counter-ISIS campaign, and do the close air support type missions over there. Low-intensity conflict is not our bread and butter. Even since the earliest days when the Raptor entered operational testing in 2002, the F-22 has performed incredibly well in simulated combat, amassing lopsided victories in the air. Even when flying against the most challenging simulated threats, advanced Russian fighters such as the Su-35 and S-300V4 and S-400, it's exceedingly rare for an F-22 to be shot down. Losses in the F-22 are a rarity regardless of the threat we're training against, Fessler said. Why the Raptor dominates. Indeed, one of the problems for the F-22 is to generate enough targets and a tough enough threat so that pilots get some useful training. Another problem is that the jet is so capable in terms of its sheer speed, acceleration, stealth, sensors, and maneuverability, it actually compensates for tactical errors. It makes up for a lot of shortcomings on the pilot side. You can have a really bad day and the airplane will just do phenomenally well, said one senior F-22 pilot who goes by the call sign Crash. Just because you win the fight doesn't mean you did well. Just because you lost doesn't mean you screwed up. We build scenarios to track that. So there are times when guys will die in training when they did everything right. And there are other times dudes are screwing up left and right and they're completely successful. But in this airplane, it's much easier to survive. In order to train pilots for the exercise, the 1st Fighter Wing uses a combination of T-38 trainers and other F-22s to act as red air replicating advanced flanker level threats. Meanwhile, the F-22's onboard computers and data links replicate enemy surface-to-air threats such as S-300V4 and S-400. During one sortie, the Raptor flew against a combination of advanced flankers and a very robust surface threat. A young 1st Fighter Wing F-22 weapon officer by the call sign of Bullet told me. Bullet, as a graduate of the Air Force's elite weapons school, was one of the lead planners for the exercise. Typically, we'll train against the biggest and baddest threats because we want to train against the newest threat on the block, Bullet told me. What's the worst case scenario so that we can employ how we would? Because when we train to that high level and into actual combat, and it's not at that high a level, we're not as task saturated. It's a lot easier for us to manage. Because the jet is so capable and the pilots are the elite of the elite, the red air has to effectively overwhelm the Raptors with sheer numbers. Indeed, Crash described one scenario where 4 F-22s took on 10 4th-gen enemy aircraft, similar to an Su-35 simultaneously, and which regenerate or come back to life. A little bit more than your typical 4th gen, Crash said. We're not training against things that are not operational yet. We're fighting against the most advanced operational threats we can. Typically, the blue F-22s will slaughter the enemy from long range. Indeed, as Fessler notes, if an enemy aircraft has survived to enter the merge or visual range combat and finds a Raptor, something's gone terribly wrong. That usually leads to an intensive debrief to understand what went wrong. Indeed, all the pilots I spoke to unanimously told me that the debrief is the most important part of the training sortie. Nonetheless, F-22 pilots train extensively for a visual range flight. We usually train full up versus full up, Crash said. We assume that a Western-trained F-22 is going to be the most challenging threat we're going to go against. A big upgrade and something needed. One recent addition to the Raptors at Langley is the new Block 3.2A Update 5 software. At long last, the new upgrade adds the Raytheon AIM-9X Sidewinder high off-bore sight missile, something long coveted by the F-22 community. The addition of the AIM-9X is a huge improvement for the Raptor. All the pilots at 1st Fighter Wing that I spoke to told me. The addition of the new weapon greatly increases the F-22's already formidable lethality. That's even though Upgrade 5 is an interim capability. The AIM-9X and the Raytheon AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles will be fully integrated onto the Raptor with the Increment 3.2B upgrade, which is yet to be fielded. The one thing that the F-22 is still lacking is a helmet-mounted cueing system, HMCS, that would be used to exploit the outer edges of the AIM-9X's capabilities. It's a feature that's common on most U.S. fighter aircraft and most foreign ones. The lack of such a system would normally place the Raptor at a severe disadvantage in a dogfight, if the aircraft didn't perform as well as it does. The Air Force is still planning on adding such a helmet-mounted cueing system to the F-22, but pilots at the 1st Fighter Wing say that it's not an absolute necessity. The Raptor can usually dominate a fight even without such a system. Indeed, as Fessler noted, even without the AIM-9X or an HMCS, F-22 pilots often close into gun range and ambush other jets in visual range. I can sneak up on a guy, Fessler said. In the F-22, I can convert on guys, and they'll never even see you there. You roll up right behind them and go, why waste a missile when you have a gun? Ultimately, as the U.S. Air Force's only dedicated 5th-generation air superiority fighter, in an increasingly hostile world where the threat grows more challenging every day, it's in the service's best interest to ensure the Raptor remains as capable as possible. Right now, the Air Force is slated to equip the F-22 with a helmet-mounted sight by 2020, but similar efforts have fallen prey to budget cuts in the past.